If you're looking to buy a house older than 20 years, make sure to watch this video till the end because we will talk about the life expectancy of all the major components in a house. Let's talk about roof first. There's typically 3 or 4 different types of roofing material that's used in all over North America, especially Canada. The major ones are asphalt shingles, torch-on, metal or tile roof. The asphalt shingles usually tend to last anywhere from 20 to 25 years. The torch-on is slightly lower, it's 15 to sometimes 20 years. Metal and tile roofing system usually lasts 50, 60, even 70 years. There's one important thing to keep in mind. If there's a huge tree pretty much covering the roof and the leaves are the branches are falling on the roof, there's a good chance your roofing system might need to be replaced sooner if you're not maintaining the roof. So usually it's better if there's a lot of moss going on your roof. It's usually better to clean your roof at least once a year, once every like 2-3 years at least. Let's move on to siding now. There's so many different siding options, usually wood, cement boards, hardy planks, vinyl siding is the most common one. The vinyl wood, which are the most common ones, they tend to typically last anywhere from 50 to 70 years. I've seen people needing to replace vinyl siding 30 years, but if you are maintaining it properly for pressure washing the vinyl, or of course you cannot pressure wash wood, if you're cleaning the wood properly, they usually should last at least 50 years, if not 60 or more. Let's move on to windows now. Most people do not replace all the windows because they could get super costly. Per window, it could be anywhere from $500 to $1,000, literally per one window. The older style, the single pane windows, tend to last anywhere from 30 to upwards of like 60 years. Depends, nowadays the double pane or even like the triple pane windows, they should last a lot longer, but of course we're mostly talking about the older houses now. If your house is, let's say, 1970s, 80s built, there's a good chance you might need to replace a few of the windows if the seal gets broken and if the window starts getting foggy. Moving on to plumbing system, there's usually copper plumbing, PEX plumbing, or poly B plumbing, and there's a couple other styles as well, but these are the majority of the houses have these options. The older ones usually have copper. They tend to last anywhere from literally 10 years to upwards of 50 years, depending on the usage. Let's say if it's a rancher, one person is living, it should be 50, 60, 70 years. If it's literally a big 3-story house with 15 people living in like 12 bedrooms, of course, the time span changes, but typically it should last around 50 years at least for a typical copper plumbing pipe. The PEX should be similar or if not more. The poly B is a very specific one that was usually used in the early to late 1990s. That is now being problematic. So literally 30 years after the poly B piping was installed, it's starting to leak now. So make sure if you have the poly B, which is the dark gray color material, try to budget that if you're buying a 1990s built house. It could be like anywhere from $8,000 upwards of $20,000 depending on the size of the house. And your hot water tanks typically last anywhere from 8 to 12 years. I've seen some last up to 20 years, but those are usually exceptions. Usually they give up after around 10 years. And the newer hot water on demand system should last around 22 years. There's one important thing about the hot water system. Some insurance companies have a clause in the entire contract of your home insurance that after a hot water tank gets older than 10 years, usually it's like 10 to 11 years, they will not cover if flooding happens due to the hot water. So make sure you read your home insurance properly, or if your hot water tank is older than 10 years, make sure to replace it. Usually it could be anywhere from $800 to like $1,500, $1,600 depending on who you hire to replace it. And your gutters along the side of the roof and your downspouts, they should last at least 30 years, if not more, depending on the wear and tear and depending on how much rain it gets in your specific location, but at least 30 years, if not more. And your appliances, the older ones usually have lasted from like 20 to 30 years, even 40 years in some cases, but the typical newer fridges, stoves, dishwashers, your laundry, your washers and dryers, just because they have so many small newer systems like AI and all the the screens in your fridges and stuff, they should last anywhere from 10 to 15 years max. And your gas furnace should typically last 25 to 35 years. Of course, you have to change the filter every year, or a couple years at least. And of course, you have to usually have an HVAC guy come and do a cleaning of your gas furnace. Usually costs a couple $100. It has to be done at least every 1 or 2, 3 years at least. And for the AC system, the vents are the same as the ones used in the furnace, but the compressor, which is usually the AC unit outside of the house, just because of depending on the wind and the rain and however many other factors of the outside factors are, that typically lasts anywhere from 10 to 15 years max. And your outdoor decks should last anywhere from 35 up to like 100 years depending, but usually after every 35 years you have to at least replace the lining because the wood starts to rot. And your garage door system usually lasts anywhere from 10 to 20 years. That's your chain motor. Usually costs like $750, $800 to replace, including the supply and installation. But the garage door could last longer. Of course, you could just replace the weatherproofing or the lining, but the motor usually has to be replaced at least like after like 15 years or so. Your hardwood flooring can literally last hundreds of years because that's like literal real hardwood, that's like trees. Of course, it loses its shine and appeal over time, so every few, let's say a couple decades or so, you have to refinish it if you want it to look nicer. Laminate flooring nowadays, that of course does not last as long as hardwood. That should last anywhere from 20 to 40 years depending on how heavy the traffic area is. Let's say if it's in the living room, of course it will wear out quicker, but if it's in a very secluded area, let's say in an office in the back, of course that could last like 50-60 years as well, but around 20-25 years should be the max, if not like lower. Your carpet will probably need to replace every like 10-15 years. Of course, there's some old super bright red, pink color, purple color carpets from like the 70s, 80s. Yes, they could last longer, but it's usually better to replace them like 15 years. Of course, at least get them shampooed and cleaned every 3-4 years, depending, if you spill something, you have to clean it as soon as possible. But 10-15 years, that should be the max for a typical carpet. And for countertops, if it's real stone like granite, or quartz, if it's like real like hard stone, they should last 100+ years. Of course, there could be a crack, or you could hit it with like a knife or something. There could be like a scratch or something. That's different. Then you might have to replace it sooner. But there's usually a polish or a cream, like quartz cream, that also comes that you can make it shiny again. But if it's laminate, the cheap countertops, they should be replaced every 10 to 15 years depending on how bad it gets over time. And your bathroom and kitchen faucets and sinks usually last anywhere from 15 to 25 years. And of course, it depends on the usage. They could start leaking, and then you can just recaulk them and just literally seal the edges. That should get you another few years, but usually after 25-30 years, they should be replaced. And finally, your interior paint on the walls should last anywhere from 5 to 15 years. Depends on how much you touch the walls, how much stuff you put alongside the wall. And those were all the major components in a house. My name is Khush Khosa. I'm a local realtor here in the Greater Vancouver area. If you have any questions regarding the local market, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. Thank you.